Welcome to the show, everybody. It's the Crypto Lark. I have with me today Shannon Curtis from Caleb and Brown, coming at us from the Blockchain Centre in Melbourne. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
Now, today we're going to be talking about quite a few different things, so I'm just going to give people a quick idea of what we're going to be chatting about. So we're going to talk about the market trends to get started off with, a bit about EOS, what you guys do over at Caleb and Brown. We're also going to be talking about Australia and New Zealand in particular, and what the situation is like here with, like, for example, banking and regulations. And we're going to be rolling on to that afterwards, talking about the Blockchain Centre of Melbourne. So make sure you stick around for all the different segments of the show. But I think let's start off with market trends. What's going on in the market? What is your opinion on the current situation?
Yeah, it's obviously it's an interesting one. I feel like we've settled in for the winter. Is the way everyone at first is kind of. It's interesting, I guess, if you compare it to the Wall Street cheat sheet. You go through all the different emotions, and at first people are like, oh, it's just a small correction, and then the market's going to turn around, and then you kind of go a bit lower, and they're like, okay, well, actually, maybe no, it's healthy. Like, it's a big correction. You know, this is what we need, and then it goes a bit lower, and people start panicking, and they're like, oh my God, this is, how long could this possibly go for? And then you kind of settle into depression. And then, for me, I'm not a technical trader. I don't understand how to read the charts, I guess, as well as others do. But I guess what I see happening is a natural progression from a monstrous amount of hype around obviously the ICO boom, which was a phenomenal innovation in the way that we raise funds through venture capital. And this is why we saw such a massive boom in the economy, in my opinion. And then once that hype is over, it's time for those projects to actually build something, and it's time for a lot of the dust to settle. I remember watching one of your interviews I watched it a few days ago, basically on what happens now with all the Ethereum, that all these ICOs have raised, and now what's the other side of the coin. And so for me, I guess what we're seeing now, or what we need to see in order for the market to really rally, is the next wave of innovation. So Ethereum really revolutionized the way that we raise funds and disrupted the venture capital industry in a huge way. Like, it raised more money than venture capital last year. So that's really big. But where do we go from here? How do we get to the next step? I don't think you're going to see these things just explode for no reason. And everyone's looking for the charts to go up, but what is the underlying core reason that is going to happen? And so I think blockchain really needs to step up to the plate and solve a fundamental problem like Ethereum did for raising money. What is the next problem that's going to be solved? How do we scale from here? None of the applications at the moment are scaling. They're not able to solve any real world problems. So my analysis is that we probably will trend sideways. We'll probably trend sideways or downwards until we have a reason not to. And so that's what I've kind of turned my attention to, finding the reasons that may explode the space into the next wave of adoption. Because I'm sure you can agree, it's not easy to use. I mean, mums and dads aren't just going to jump in and throw their life savings into something where they make one mistake and, oh, whoops, you lost your private key? Oh, sorry, there goes your entire life savings. It's not going to happen. Like, no one's going. The mainstream are not gonna put up with that. So there's a long way to go between porting, I guess, the amount of technology that makes it easy in order to bring the next wave of people in. So that's when I really started to turn my attention to projects like EOS, for example. And I'm not saying EOS is the be-all and the end-all. There are so many good ideas out there, but of all the research that I've done, this is the project that really ticks all the boxes for me. I mean, if we're looking at what is it going to take to move into the next wave, then what we need to look at is, what does the current system have that's amazing, and what are its flaws? And then what does blockchain have that's amazing, and what are its flaws? And how do we bring these two things together?
And so how do you think EOS is solving that problem?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of really fundamental and important differences that it solves. First of all, I think using a blockchain needs to be so simple you don't realize you're using a blockchain. Now, have you ever used Steam it yourself? I'm sure you have.
Oh yeah.
And of course, and many of your viewers will have used it as well. When you're using Steam it, it's not perfect, and it has its improvements that need to be made as well. But by the by, when you're using Steam it, you don't really realize you're using a blockchain at all. So the average person would have no idea. So this is absolutely key. Now, I'm sure most of your listeners know that Steemit was created by Dan Larimer, and Dan Larimer is obviously the person creating EOS. So EOS is going to be made in the same fashion, but as an enterprise solution. So first of all, it's going to be so simple, you don't know that you're using a blockchain. Second of all, it's going to need some mainstream current protocols that we have now embedded into its system, things like account recovery, which is something that EOS has as part of its system that it's proposing, is account recovery. So that's a fundamental thing to make it much more safe, I guess, for the everyday person to start using as they navigate their way through. As mistakes get made, you're going to need to be able to rectify that. So that's the second thing. Third thing is it needs to be a feeless system. The same as Steemit, there needs to be no fees to the end user. I'm sure you've heard the analogy many times before, but if you were to try and run a social network like Steemit or like Facebook on top of Ethereum, for example, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars just in the lags with every single gas transaction. So you need to have a system that's free for end users, which EOS is as well. Obviously, it needs to be able to scale. And we don't have enough time, I guess, today to delve into how it's going to do all of this. But if you know, that's certainly something we could do at another time, or you know, something you could delve into deeper for yourself. But there's a very cool ways that it proposes to scale as well. And governance is a really important issue as well. Take for example, you get hacked, let's say. At the moment in the real world, there are ways to go back and deal with that. And as part of the governance mechanism of EOS, they propose that you will be able to contest malicious transactions and put it to a mediator, obviously chosen by a body of peers in the community. And you could probably choose which mediator you want to use, and you'll be able to say, hey, this was a hack, this wasn't a legitimate transaction, please open up an investigation and decide. And then they'll, I guess, be able to contact the other party and say, hey, what was the reasons that you took those funds? Was this a legitimate transaction? What was your side of the argument? And then if it comes back, or they don't reply, or they just disappear, or they're unable to prove it, then the governance will state you need 2/3 consensus from all the block producers running the network to all agree that it was malicious. It can't be done willy-nilly, but you will be able to, like I guess Ethereum did with the DAO, you will be able to roll back a situation like that. Look, some people argue that's not a good thing. Some people would say, well, that's not immutable then. But I think in order to take this to the next level, we need to build protocols in that bring the old world and the new world and put them together. And simply code as law is not without its flaws as well. So these are the things that I see as being able to take this to the next level. It's going to be able to scale to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of transactions a second. It's going to be safer to use. To build a decentralized application needs to be as easy as building a website. So I guess what I'm trying to say is to rocket blockchain into the next level, we either need one of the currencies to be adopted in some like massive way. I guess we would need some massive economic instability to cause people to turn to another option, which could be blockchain, which is highly possible and looking like it's going to be very probable. Or we need one of these enterprise solutions, something like Ethereum, EOS, I guess Lisk, any Neo, Cardano, any of these platforms to get some serious mainstream adoption by businesses and by people. And the way I view EOS is like web protocol we have now, but a better version of it. The average person doesn't care so much about, is this more censorship resistant, or is this better, more democratized, or most people don't care about that. They just want technology that's better for them to use. So if you could create an internet protocol that I guess was like unhackable, unspammable, a better version, uncensorable, a better version of the internet we have now, then I see some mass adoption would take place, and I think that's what we need to rocket ourselves to the next level.
I think you make some really interesting points there, and there's quite a few I want to hit back on, but the overall trend is, yes, we need that experience for people with blockchain where they don't know they're using it. And that's when it's going to get really big. When people are developing the kind of apps that make it a seamless experience for people, much in the same way they don't know what's going on the backs of the internet that they're using.
Sure.
They don't need to know what's going on necessarily in the back of the blockchain technology that they're using. So that's going to be really big. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of really big projects coming out that are looking to address these issues in their own different ways. And EOS, of course, 100%. Is one of the great projects that are coming out. Cardano, as you mentioned, Neo, all these guys. It'll be really interesting to see just exactly what they deliver. And yeah, 2018 is going to be the year of delivering to a large extent. And not just the platforms, although the platforms really need to deliver in a big way to make their mark. You know, there's a lot of competition out there for people like Cardano. You know, Stellar's already taking off, doing a lot of ICOs, and EOS has billions of dollars sitting there that they're able to use. Maybe a little less now.
Don't discredit that as well. Like, not that you are, but like anyone that's wondering which platform is going to launch, like, there's so many amazing technologies and theories, but how do we take that from being a theory into the real world? And like you said, like EOS, man, it's sitting on, you know, at least, let's say, $1 billion that they've pledged to put back into VC funding, plus their partnerships with Galaxy Digital and Mike Novogratz, 325 million, FinLab AG, 100 million, Tomorrow BC Venture Capital Fund. I mean, all of this money that's going to be used to launch the platform and pay for ICOs. We've seen this massive ICO bubble that's, you know, ending starting to probably be the realization that a lot of those projects are failing, and you know, a lot of that ICO model is not so good. So what's the next wave? Instead of buying a lot of Ethereum to purchase these ICOs, the way it's looking like it's going to play out on EOS is that they will venture capital fund the project like they did with Everpedia, and then every EOS token holder becomes a token holder of all of those projects as well. So by owning EOS, you automatically get every project that's, well, this is the way it's looking that it's going to pan out. It hasn't been officially stated, but you would get a piece of every ICO that lists the equivalent value that you have of EOS tokens. So you kind of people are buying EOS to hold EOS to run the network, and it's a positive feedback loop. You know, the more money that goes into building these projects, and then they do well, and then that money goes back in, and we could get into this with the block producers as well. There's all sorts of incentives for them to put their money back into the system, but I might save that for another time. But
I think one other interesting point to bring on here too is that the dApps themselves need to be, not just the platforms, but the dApps that are being built. This is what's going to, I think, get a lot of traction too, is who is going to attract the best dApps, which dApps are going to reach peak user levels, because it's all great if you have 10,000 dApps running on your blockchain, but if nobody's using them, it doesn't matter. But if one blockchain has only 5 dApps which are used by everybody, that becomes a whole game-changing situation. So hopefully we can see some of those dApps actually delivering real products 100%. That are being used by people en masse.
Well, I guess if you have funds like Galaxy Digital, for example, that are actually paying, so it's not just a whole bunch of money being raised in an ICO and it may work, it may not, and it never eventuates and it disappears. I mean, these guys, this is what they do as a profession. You know, if they're funding these dApps to launch on top of this platform, I guarantee they probably vetted them very, very hard. They probably have an extremely good use case. Not all of them will work, but you probably will see the quality, I guess, of projects that come to fruition. My opinion is that there's going to be a lot of them that are obviously of such high quality that they do get mainstream adoption. Otherwise, these big companies probably wouldn't get behind them. So it's a different way of doing it. It's different, but I think you're right. Like, we really need to see the adoption in the dApps. At the moment, I mean, a lot of this is speculation based on, hey, this is our white paper, give us a bunch of Ethereum, and this is what we're going to do. But what does that mean? Like, what happens now?
I would like $30 million, please. I wrote a paper.
Yeah, exactly. But,
hey, let's switch gears here a little bit. I want to talk about Caleb & Brown, because this is the company that you work for. Sure. What are you guys doing?
Okay, yeah. So Caleb & Brown, we're a brokerage firm based out of Melbourne, Australia. And our main value proposition is trying to build a safe safer environment for the Australian and international investing community. Now we've recently opened up accounts in New Zealand as well.
New Zealand!
Yes, we'd like to officially announce in New Zealand that we're ready for business there as well. But I guess our main value is taking the everyday investor, anyone from your average mum and dad all the way up to, like, really, we have some very high profile large corporate clients as well, but making the transition onto the blockchain is super easy. So it's all personalized brokerage. You'll have a personalized account manager that's going to help walk you through the process, taxation, consultancy, ledger setup, and hardware training so that it's safe and it's not just, well, I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff because I heard about it and I don't really know what I'm doing. We really, if we're going to decentralize the world, we need to make sure everyone's armed properly to do it right. And one wipeout or one hack,
big time.
Yeah, 100%. So the other main value proposition is high level transactions. So our minimum trade is $10,000, right around where the exchanges limit out. And then it goes all the way up to about $50 million per transaction. So anything up to 5 million is same day, and then anything above that is a 3-day turnaround. But it allows big businesses to bring themselves on in a secure way, and families as well. There's no point having been a really smart investor, done really well last year, and then had tried to pull $10,000 out a day until you got your $500,000 out to pay off your house mortgage whilst the market is crashing. That's absolutely not acceptable or safe. So our main proposition is to try and build a really safe community, and we're able to do that by offering people the chance to do 50,000, 500,000, a million, 10,000, 200,000, within hours. So it literally takes about 2 hours to get KYC verified, and you don't have to wait for the money to hit our account either. Once you've transferred it, then you show us the receipt, we'll actually execute the trade. We just won't release the coins to you until the money is cleared. So you literally be in the market, in or out of the market within, an hour, which is very, very good for you. That's the kind of the next level you need to go to if you want people to start taking this seriously as well. And that's what we try to do for everyone. So
it's got to be easy. It's got to be easy. And
it's got to
right
be easy.
Now, if I think about how long it took me to buy my first Bitcoin, it took a long time, and it took a lot of dedication because I really, really wanted to get it. But all the KYCs, trying to find the best provider, going through 10, 20 different websites, trying to find which ones are legitimate, which ones aren't, which ones I can, upload my money onto.
It's so hard.
It's very difficult. Of course, most places only accept USD, so for Australians and New Zealanders, it becomes a little bit harder because your options are a little more limited when it comes to who you can actually go and buy off of, and then are you getting a decent rate, or are you getting whacked with like some huge percentage, which has definitely happened.
Yeah, exactly. So. No, it really does. I mean, just as a good use case, Caleb and Brown were my brokers. I started off using them as an investor in February of 2017, and it wasn't until about 9 months later, after using their services, that I decided, hey, I really believe in these guys. I'm going to use my marketing background to help expand their company and throw myself deep into it, which is when I set up the meeting and we went further from there. So I know I started with the struggle of how do I get more than $8,000 in? How do I get more than $10,000 in? How do I get it out? This is really expensive even when I do. So yeah, I know better than anyone how good the service is, which is why I'm so proud to promote it.
That's a pretty awesome service that you guys are offering. I certainly, anybody out there who has had to go through that problem of trying to move a big amount in or out, particularly out's really hard. It seems to be easier to get it in than to get it out, but getting out is very tricky for a lot of people out there. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit as well about, I guess, the kind of situation with banking and accounts and all these different things that's happening in Australia and New Zealand. So can you give us a little bit of the situation of what's happening in Australia as far as people being able to buy and sell cryptocurrencies, how their banks are reacting to all that?
Sure. It's a bit of an interesting one here in Australia. It's a really mixed bag. I mean, on the one hand, you have banks. Some banks are quite public with their opposition to crypto, but some are quite public in their supporting of blockchain. So they'll come out. I think Commonwealth Bank recently came out and stated that they were investigating a lot of blockchain technology, and that they were, very pro it. Other banks have said similar things, but we also know, working in the industry, there's still a lot of resistance. There are a lot of accounts being shut down left, right, and center, just by being associated with crypto, and I can confirm that is definitely happening. Obviously, I can't disclose anyone's identity, but working in the space, I can tell you there's still, it's a warfare. You don't want to hand a sword to the person that's going to cut off your head, I guess, is the way I would describe it. And I don't see it being like that either. I think there's going to be synergy moving forward. But obviously, with a new technology, it's definitely happening. Behind the scenes, accounts are being shut by a various number of. I mean, we saw with CoinSpot over Christmas, there was a huge jam up in people being able to deposit, and they didn't officially come out, but I'm pretty sure that had to do with their banking issues. We've experienced similar problems as well throughout our life. Yeah, it's an interesting one. What's happening over in New Zealand?
Well, definitely, the situation's a bit back and forth, to be honest. We're still trying to find our feet as far as what regulation's going to look like. I know that the big announcement here last year was that if it looks like a security, it's probably a security, and therefore it needs to be regulated, and if it's not regulated, then you're not supposed to invest in it. But no one's kind of really cared very much about that. I know as far as the banking scene goes, there are, for example, Cryptopia, they got their account shut down, so there's no longer the New Zealand dollar tether that there used to be for Cryptopia. And so there is definitely that watchful eye. I know that BitPrime recently as well, they've got much stricter on actually being able to cash out for people. It's a $10,000 a day limit and $25,000 a month limit. There is a process you can go through to get higher limits, but still, they're tightening the situation here a little bit, without a doubt.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's not surprising, I guess. Moving forward, I guess a lot of people are mixed bags on regulation as well. Some people think regulation's bad, some people think it's good. I understand the ideology of wanting an unregulated market, but I think actually a regulated market could be a really good thing. I mean, it's certainly going to bring, I think, a lot more stability in it, so long as the regulations are reasonable and not controlled and corrupted. But that could make a serious difference moving forward, and then you might see a lot more institutional support, which may actually make the industry a lot better. So
that's it. It'll provide that easy catalyst for them to get involved and get their money in. And I think that's one thing that scares a lot of institutional investors. I know they look at the cryptocurrency market, they go, wow, look at that volatility, we can make a fortune. But where there's the problems with the banks and different things like this. Because it's like you could take the analogy of the cannabis industry to an extent in the United States, where they can do business, they're allowed to operate, but no banks want to take their money.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And we've seen this happen a lot in different jurisdictions. I mean, some banks in Australia have come out against it, but if you look at, there are some countries where all the banks came together because they probably got that little nod from the government saying, shut down all the crypto businesses, guys. We don't want you to be storing their money.
Yeah. I think it's to not confuse as well banks with government, because we've seen some very pro-government action in Australia, to be fair. The Turnbull government gave Power Ledger obviously a grant from the federal government, which was huge. It's a government public acknowledgement of a decentralized project, which is I thought was a very big step. Obviously, we've gotten rid of the double taxing. The regulations have come in 4th of April here in Australia as well. They go live, so we'll see the first really, defined set of regulations here in Australia, which will be really big, and they're quite good. Obviously, they're very tight on anti-money laundering and stuff like that, but generally they're not anti-crypto at all. So we're seeing a lot of really pro-government moves. I guess the resistance from the banks is not in line with a governmental opinion either. So
yeah,
that's interesting to note.
That's a really good point. I think banks are potentially more threatened by cryptocurrencies than governments are. They look and say, well, as long as we're getting the taxes, it's kind of okay. But this has been the trend, I think, generally. If you look around the world, the most common headline I see is that we want to make sure that's not used for money laundering. We want to get the taxes. And if we can ensure those things, well, then we're kind of okay with it. People can use it as they want, largely. I mean, there's obviously drastically different situations between countries, but that seems to be the overall consensus.
Important to remind people as well that the governments, they probably need this technology as much as we do as individuals, as much as we want it. They're suffering massive debt-based, quantitative easing type bubble situations where they've run their currency into the ground since 2008, and at some point that's going to need to be addressed, and it might be this year, it might be next year, it might be in 3 years, but at some point you can't just keep printing debt into infinity. It's not economically possible. So I think governments are cautious to not just jump and have a system collapse, but they're as equally dependent on needing to move into a new system as anyone else. So I think that's why you're seeing a lot of slowing down of it, but certainly not extinguishing it. And a lot of people, why don't they just try and outlaw it? But it's not in anyone's best interest. So.
And they can't. It would only make it cooler.
And they can't, of course. Of course. Totally. But I think they need it as much as we do. So
I think that's a really good point. There's so many different projects out there which can actually really help governments, land registries, voting on the blockchain.
Yeah. Totally.
It can be used for anti-corruption measures. It just goes on and on and on about the potential for blockchain technology in particular to have a positive impact on governments. Now, I wanted to actually roll into our last topic here. You're currently at the Blockchain Centre in Melbourne. What do you guys do at the Blockchain Centre?
Yeah, so the Blockchain Centre is a really cool co-working space here. It's all about education. It's all about incubation for companies. Basically, it's a non-for-profit, and it's everything blockchain. Businesses come here to learn about how they can port their existing companies or start new companies on the blockchain. They have full incubation courses. There's a co-working space where you can rent desks and work on projects together. They do live events here all the time, educating people on crypto. I host on a Wednesday night something called Talk and Trade and EOS 101 to teach people about those projects. They do developer courses. They do all sorts of cool stuff. They do Bitcoin 101, mining 101. It's just a space purely dedicated to teaching people about cryptocurrency and businesses how to real world use case put the blockchain into action in their business. And it's not just here in Melbourne. This is where they started, but they're overseas. They're in Lithuania. They're in Shanghai. They're opening an account. They're opening centers all around Australia, in Adelaide and Perth and Sydney. They're on a massive expansion at the moment, but yeah, very, very cool space. Hopefully we'd like to see one in Auckland soon as well. But yeah, one interesting note, so this is a use case I could talk about the Blockchain Centre from my experience. I mentioned earlier that I'm a big advocate of EOS, and one thing that a lot of people don't know about it is the governance system is delegated proof of stake, but which means that you actually vote in the people that run the blockchain. Now, one of the mechanisms of voting these people in is that it's widely accepted in the community that a lot of the money that gets paid as block rewards is going to go back into the community to help build the community, to create this positive feedback loop again. And so there's this team out of Australia called EOSphere that I'm very, very passionate about. They're Australia's only, at the moment, candidacy to be a block producer. And at the moment, what they're doing is working very closely here with the Blockchain Centre to create, say, developer courses and business incubation courses to actually teach people how to build businesses on top of EOS and how to actually use the technology properly. I'm also in talks with RMIT. I'm actually leaving this interview and going straight to RMIT to help them work out how they want to implement it as well. And should EOSphere be successful in being elected as one of the Australian block producers, then you'll probably see a big collaboration between RMIT and EOSphere, where who knows what could happen. A research foundation might be set up where they are able to put a lot of those rewards back into the centre to help create blockchain-based degrees and courses and research different industries that could benefit by porting over, and really see a massive, and you could be talking about tens of millions of dollars that are going into these sorts of organizations to help build the community here within Australia and within New Zealand and Southeast Asia and this region of the world. So that's very, very exciting. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that the Blockchain Centre promote. They do it with NEM as well. NEM's a sponsor here that teaches people how to build on NEM. So yeah, it's just very real world implementation of the technology and teaching people how to do that. And it's a very cool space.
That's really awesome that exists, that's there, that they have this ability to say, hey, come here. We will teach you how to use blockchain technology in your business. We'll tell you about the benefits that it can offer. Here are some different blockchains which are willing to sit down and talk with you and say, hey, here's how we can benefit you. Here's what we can do for you. That's really cool stuff.
Exactly.
Now,
it's super cheap as well, like being a non-for-profit. You know, like if you wanted to rent a desk here, it's like $200 a month. It's like $50 a week. They're not an organization. They're literally here to teach people how to use blockchain. It's very, very cool.
That's some of the cheapest office space going. That's
the
price
right?
of lunch.
Even
if
you're not into the blockchain,
just come hang out and drink coffee all day. Exactly. What are you guys doing over there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Now, I'm going to put a link for Caleb and Brown and for the Blockchain Centre Melbourne in the description down below. So if anyone wants to get more information about either of those, please go through and click on them and check it out. And you can read about it a bit more. Shannon, I want to thank you for chatting with us today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for having me. And lastly, before I go, I just want to say, as a big thank you to you as well, we really appreciate the influencers that put a lot of their time and effort into educating people to be smarter in the space and to understand the space better. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you for all of your hard work. And with the link that we'll put in, we'll give any listeners that have come from your show are obviously active in finding out more and not doing things blindly. So as a thank you to them for being educated and willing to learn, and as a thank you for you to doing it, we'll give them a discount if they come from your show as well on their trades. So it's just our way of saying thank you for also helping trying to make a safe community, because that's what it's all about.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's a crazy jungle out there in crypto land, but it's good to good to have people who can help guide you through at least a little bit. So anyway, Shannon, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, mate.